Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into SEC Nightly, the nightly show dedicated to the top news and notes from the nation's top conference. I'm your humble host, Brooks Austin, and we've got a great one lined up for you guys tonight. Obviously, today was National Signing Day. I will be bringing on my boy John Garcia Jr., the lead recruiting analyst for SI.com, to talk about all of the teams that were ranked from the SEC in his top 10 rankings over there at SI.com. Auburn, Florida, A&M, LSU, Bama, and of course Georgia, all amongst the list of teams that we will be going deep into tonight. We'll talk about some other talking points around the league as well. 11 of 14 SEC teams filled up the top 30 spots in the composite 24/7 rankings, and 13 of 14 were in the top 50. I believe Mizzou, the only football team outside of that top 50 from the SEC, and a lot of that had to do, obviously, with the coaching turnover. But we won't waste any more time. We're going to bring in our boy John Garcia straight in from the SI.com StreamYard feed. John, my man, how are we doing tonight? I know it's been a long day, National Signing Day, the biggest of days for you in your business. What you got going on, brother, and how are we doing?
Just excited to cap the day with you and look back at the SEC, and a big shocker, right? They had another great year, another recruiting champion. It looked like this was the year it would not be an SEC school, but lo and behold, here's Georgia back on top.
Yeah, I mean, Clemson always trying to make a perennial push for that top spot, Dabo Swinney, and they do it in a totally different way, John. I know you know this, but some people may not. You know, no program in this country offers fewer prospects in each class than Clemson. They typically keep their offers around the 160 to 170 mark. Some programs like Tennessee are even eclipsing 420 offers handed out in each class. So Clemson does it in a much different scenario, but again, your top 10 rankings riddled with SEC teams. We're just going to start right off the top, and we'll go in order. Obviously, the winners of today and for the better part of the recruiting cycle has to be those Georgia Bulldogs. Kirby Smart and his staff pulling off yet again another top-ranked recruiting class. What stands out most about what Georgia did, in particularly today? We know about the early signees that they had back in November, but what did they do today to seal up that nation's top-ranked spot on your SI All-Americans list there, John?
Well, you know, we talked about it a lot sort of going into signing day. This was a matter of something that Georgia really hasn't had to deal with. It was a matter of maintenance. It was a matter of holding on to what you got. Those O-line commitments are elite, top center, top tackle in America, both somewhat wavering, really curious about other schools, you know, Florida, Arkansas, Illinois, Alabama for Cedric Van Pran. So it was really a different vibe with Georgia this year, but it was about holding on to Jones and Van Pran. They, of course, did. And then icing on the cake, you flip a DB from Ole Miss in Branch. You pick up an in-state defensive lineman who, you know, I didn't even know there was space for, but that's what you do on signing day at the 11th hour. That's the move you make. That was a classic Kirby Smart right there. If you don't think the rankings matter to him, you know, just don't look back at today, because it was very evident that volume was going to be a part of this. How many walk-ons did they bring in? Not that
10.
Those factor in, but it's crazy.
10.
Yeah. So
they brought in 10 of them, John, and 2 of which were 3 stars. One of them, obviously, Jackson Muschamp, the quarterback that was formerly committed to Colorado State, obviously the son of Will Muschamp. And then they flipped an offensive lineman from here in the state of Georgia that was originally committed to Colorado. So 2 3-stars with Power 5 full ride offers. Kirby Smart convinced them to stay in state. Well, Muschamp going to come out of state. He's a Hammond High School product there from South Carolina, right outside the doorsteps of, Gamecock country there in Columbia. But, you know, before we get any further, John, and I'm, you know, this is my fault for not mentioning this, kind of tell the viewers what's going on with SI All-American, how you go about ranking your systems and what goes in and what all factors in to your ranking systems. Because we could sit here all day and talk about these orders, but if they don't understand why, it's kind of useless. My bad, man.
Oh, you're good. Yeah, we're on a bit of a different wavelength.
And the correct wavelength. I know I'm a company man here, and you're going to go into it, and then people understand why I said that. But go ahead, my bad.
Yeah. So basically, we project for college. Others project for the NFL, which is great. And there's some gray area there, but we love college football. I'm watching ball all day Saturday. Sunday is almost an off day for me. So we project for college football. That's first and foremost. And then when it comes to ranking recruiting teams, we do factor in transfers. So hello, Georgia, Jamie Newman, Trey McKitty, but we also factor in 2-year depth charts. So it's not just who can get the most 5 stars, who can get the most that Phil needs. Look at that 2-year depth chart. If Clemson is going to lose Trevor Lawrence, you need to bring in elite quarterbacks now. And that's what they did. That's why they were number one for us much longer than they were for pretty much everybody else. Number one until today, talking about the Clemson Tigers. So it's a 2-year depth chart. Projecting for college and not the NFL. So we would be a little higher on a Bryce Young than DJ Uangalele, something like that. So just a little bit of a different pace. And again, that 2-year depth chart is cannot be emphasized enough, especially in today's nature of roster turnover. Emphasizing the 2-year depth chart is becoming one of the most important parts of what we want to do here at SI and how we want to rank classes. So that's why a little bit of a variation up top. And I'm getting a lot of flack from Bama fans because I've got Clemson number 2, Bama number 3. But again, 2-year depth chart and star power filling needs, not just star power. So that great linebacker class Alabama has, awesome, but how many of those guys are going to factor in over the next 18 months? That's what I'm curious about, and that's one of the big separators between Alabama and Clemson for me.
Yeah, and I think that's what separates, our rankings over there and your rankings for that matter over there at SI All-American over, some of the others. And again, that pro aspect and pro caliber ratings, and those other guys will tell you about it. That's what they're there for. They are trying to emulate most what the NFL draft is going to look like, in 3 or 4 years for those prospects. But back to Georgia just for a little bit to tie the bow on the class. Some guys that will immediately play an impact and an immediate role for Georgia in the 2020 season. And John, I can't help but think that's kind of a recruiting talking point now for the University of Georgia. When Kirby Smart goes and talks to these guys, it's, hey, look, we played 45 guys last year with at least 40 snaps on the defensive end, or whatever the numbers are. We're going to play a bunch of guys. We're going to play them young. And then, it's an NFL culture. If you want to leave after 3, we're more than happy with that. And matter of fact, we'll almost push you towards doing that. What is kind of the general response? I know you talk to a lot more national recruits than I do. Georgia is going to a national brand. When you talk to recruits across the country, what is their first immediate thoughts of the Georgia Bulldogs?
Well, like you said, they see an opportunity, but they also see a sort of a classic SEC mentality, especially when it comes to defense. I think there's been some up and down in selling the program to offensive recruits, particularly at the quarterback position recently, right? After the Jake Fromm, the 5-star, 5-star, 5-star thing. After that happened, it was kind of tough, and it was understandable. But defensively, kids point to Georgia before a lot of other top programs. Kids in Florida point to Georgia before they get to the Florida Gators when they're talking pure SEC attacking style defense. So I think that resonates with prospects all over the country. It is a different vibe. Kirby Smart's a defensive coach. That's something that's very attractive for a defensive prospect. And honestly, it's something that's becoming few and far between, right? Everybody wants that offensive guy. All the newer hires, it seems like they're targeting offensive coaches and settling for a defensive coach if it comes to that. So I think that's still an appealing aspect of Kirby Smart, much like it was where he was at before at Nick Saban in Alabama. And that's where he learned most of what he's implemented here, and then had his own spin on it, right? Kirby's a much different guy than Nick with recruits. Kirby is an active recruiter, and I mean active in a lot of ways. He is intense, in your face. It's not for everybody, but a lot of young kids like it, and obviously you see the results.
Yeah, over $3 million spent in the calendar year of 2019 by the University of Georgia football staff on recruiting alone. So when these coaches talk about, making a commitment to the brand, making a commitment to the program, that's exactly what they're talking about. Look, Georgia has 10, preferred walk-ons, 9 of which are from the state of Georgia. You don't think a little bit of that has to do with the fact that Kirby Smart can hop in a helicopter and be on your doorsteps, on your practice field within an hour and a half? I mean, that has to play a factor. Following Kirby around, in his recruiting visits here in the state of Georgia is one of the, funner things to do, but you pretty much got to have his name on Google Alerts because he pops up all over the place. Let's move on because we're already behind the clock here a little bit. Let's jump right into what Alabama did today, or what they maybe didn't do. Some of the guys they lost out on and some shuffling in that class like you forecasted would happen, John. What went on with Alabama today, finishing number 3 on your SI All-American rankings?
Yeah, big miss, right? Big miss for Alabama on signing day. McKinley Jackson, the top prospects, maybe in all of SEC country going into the traditional signing period, goes with A&M over Alabama. I was surprised. I had Alabama projected. A lot of people did. I just got off the phone with a source in Mississippi right before this show who said he was shocked by McKinley picking A&M over Alabama. But again, track the visits, right? The last trip
Yeah.
was indeed to College Station. So that was a big miss for Alabama, but I thought otherwise pretty solid. They were maintaining guys who they already had verbally committed. Some were on the bubble, and they signed 2 of them, 2 of the 3. Javon Baker, as well as a big offensive lineman, Damian George. I thought those guys could potentially end up elsewhere. So I think it was a reserved kind of win for Alabama, but they will take it heading into this off season with a top 3 class. Not as sexy as we're used to in terms of splashes and flips and things like that. You miss on Jackson, you missed on Ennis Rakestraw, you technically missed for Alfred Collins, although we all knew that was Texas for quite some time. But Rakestraw in the morning was a surprise, and then Jackson at lunchtime was certainly a bigger one and a more important one that the rest of the SEC may feel as early as next year.
I had the opportunity to talk to Ennis Rakestraw, just to interview him when he first got picked up a lot of steam in that, the late push in the 2020 class, picked up an offer from Georgia. And you could really get the sense from him that Missouri paying him that close attention very, very early on in that senior cycle, them getting in there with the official offer in October of his senior year. Again, until that point, they were the first real Power 5 school to get in on Ennis Rakestraw. And then next thing you know, he's taking official visits to Alabama and all some of the other big schools in the country and ends up sticking with the Tigers. Had a chance to talk to Ennis today. I think a good decision by him. He's going to be able to be the feature of that class there for the Tigers.
And what a great moment, right? When he committed.
Yeah.
He was emotional. Eli Drinkwitz got emotional. It was sort of a pure moment in recruiting, which is not something we see enough of. It was kind of a dream come true type of feel. So he's a kid that, I'm rooting for sure.
Man,
absolutely.
And John, every kid has that moment, or maybe every 3-star has that moment where they have another kid on their high school team that comes in and gets recruited by a big program that they get told they're not quite good enough for just yet. But could you imagine being a 3-star cornerback that's that talented, or at least carries that chip on your shoulder at Duncanville High School, of all places there in Texas, which is one of the bigger high school programs that pumps out Division I talents constantly? I mean, heck, within 48 hours after the national championship, Ed Orgeron was walking the hallways there at Duncanville High. So it's one of the bigger programs in high school football. And for that guy to constantly have programs walk by him, and then for it to finally happen, him finally be able to, go to college for free and take that burden off of his mom, which is something he talked to me about, meaning a lot, which means a lot to a lot of these guys. Let's move on to LSU, number 5 on your rankings here. The defending national champions did most of their work. I think their biggest signing, obviously, you lose Jermaine Burton on early national signing period, but the start and stopping point of this class has to be Avery Gilbert. What do you think LSU did in this class, and what did they do to put them here at number 5?
Yeah, I think the pass catchers are the story of their whole cycle, right? That was the big difference in LSU this year versus every other year we've seen them recruit. They had at one point Arik Gilbert, Jermaine Burton, Rakeem Jarrett, all these receivers coming in, Keyshawn Butte, great wide receivers coming in. And then on signing day in December, they lose 2 of them. And how do they rebound from that? They do hold on to Gilbert, but they bring in Alex Adams out of Mississippi, who's a really productive player. He's probably not Jermaine Burton, but he's a really productive player. But I think at the same time, the profile for Keyshawn Butte actually increased. Loved him at the Under Armour All-America game week. We thought he was a productive kid who was just sort of a fast guy who made plays, kind of in between raw and polished. No. This kid is ready to go sooner rather than later. And with what they're losing outside at wide receiver, I think he becomes one of the jewels of the class. But there's no doubt that that conversation begins with Gilbert, the top tight end we've scouted in several years, one of the most polished players at any position I've scouted, productive, big, strong, fast, mature, plays against great competition. Basically, every box you'd want to check as a tight end, he did. And that big surprise, and that's still one of the top 10 or so surprises of the cycle. That is still the banner recruit for LSU, and the one that looks the most different on paper following that offensive explosion in 2019.
Yeah, you always wonder how high school products and high school recruits are going to translate to the next level, especially, I mean, the attributes typically translate, but when it comes to picking up offenses, being able to learn, personnel and formations and all that good stuff can be rather complex, especially when you're talking about a system that's going to have some turnover this year there at LSU. So it's going to be a learning curve for everybody, including and especially the new guys. But when you talk about a guy like Rick Gilbert, when you go watch him there at Marietta High School, or when you went to watch him there at Marietta High School, you saw a guy that played end of line tight end. Saw a guy that lined up in the slot. You saw a guy that lined up at outside as a primary receiver. Saw a guy that lined up as a fullback, as a tailback. Now, obviously that shows versatility as an athlete. He's able to line up in all those positions. But what it tells me as a scout and as a talent evaluator is that guy can pick up an offense, and that guy can learn the offense and never have to be worried about whether or not he's going to miss an assignment or miss a play call. Now, granted, at the high school level, 95% of those offensive plays and those schemes were drawn up to get Gilbert the ball and get him the ball in space. But, an incredibly productive high school athlete and one of the best route runners I've seen at that size at the tight end position. And, there were some rumors that whether or not he wanted to play wide receiver at the college level. And matter of fact, I believe Tennessee, their foot in the door was
250 pounds. Man.
I am understanding of that, John. But the foot in the door for Tennessee, a program like Tennessee, was going to be to placate to those wants, to tell him, yeah, if you want to play wide receiver, we'll let you do it. The great thing there about at LSU, playing there in that new system, whatever they end up bringing, I'm assuming it's going to be similar to last year, or at least based off that assumption. He's not going to have to do much into the line blocking. He's going to be out in space doing what he does best. So let's move on from LSU on to Texas A&M. And we've already kind of hit on what they did today, sealing the deal on McKinley Jackson. And look, if you were paying attention to SEC Nightly here last night, Cole Thompson of all Aggies, pretty much filled you in here and told you that this was going to happen. Texas A&M made a late push for this prospect out of the state of Mississippi, and a guy who absolutely dominated the all-star circuit. John, tell me what A&M got today in McKinley Jackson.
Well, just think of a dominant interior defender who also happened to have double-digit sacks, not just last year or the year before, but 3 years running as a true 320-pound interior guy. Now, I know it's South Mississippi, it's the Gulf Coast, it's not the deepest state in the country, but just think of this, guys. If you're School X and you know you're playing McKinley Jackson, 9 times out of 10, you're going to try to scheme away from that. And most 100%. Quarterbacks nowadays in spread systems are going to be fairly mobile. And even still, double-digit sacks 3 years in a row. That is just there's not a lot of DTs who have done that. And I think that just spurred him into a great playoff run and postseason run here in 2019 to where he just commands your attention. I think that's the best compliment that I could give him. And I think that's why he's poised to play pretty early in College Station. Kind of quietly here, Jimbo Fisher and that Aggie defense has put together some D-line recruiting classes the last couple of years. DeMarvin Leal last year played as a true freshman. He was the headliner of that class. And it wouldn't shock me if Jackson is sort of 2.0, at least in the regard of playing soon and having an immediate impact on the front lines. And again, when you're Bama and LSU and you lose a kid like this, it's within your division. So now you got to deal with him for let's say 3 years.
Yeah, and one question I have for you, John, and I know you've watched a lot more of McKinley's tape than I have. A lot of questions about the young man's motor, whether or not he continues to play at 325 pounds. I said on last night's show, I think this is a guy who's a dominant strength and conditioning program from being an absolutely unblockable player at the next level. They lost Mbugakwe, I guess is his name, the defensive tackle, to the NFL draft. I probably just flat out butchered that young man's last name. Wore 52 for Texas A&M. If you watched them last year play at all, he flashed off the tape. All you need to know. He's gone. McKinley probably going to slide in, get early reps there. What do you have to say about, just his conditioning levels and what he might turn into, in college? Because this is an ascending player, right? Someone who's going to get much better during college, not going to get much worse.
Yeah, I think McKinley was one of these guys that we knew about as a freshman and a sophomore, which is sort of dangerous. I think there's an element where you can over scout a kid because you got to remember he's still developing, sort of trying to find his way. So I do think he was a bit over scouted. So yeah, we were at more games of his volume wise compared to a kid who's like Rakestraw, who comes up as a senior, who we just get a great first impression and we kind of run with it. Jackson didn't have that luxury. So yeah, in the middle of his high school career, there were a lot of motor questions. Is he lazy? Is he sloppy? XYZ. Well, he's 15, 16 years old at that point, but he's rebounded, and that's what you want to see. If a kid dips, you just want to see him bounce back. I remember when Minka Fitzpatrick was a freshman and everybody was in, oh, he's going to be the next big thing. And then a year goes by and you don't hear a lot about him. So some people started to over scout Minka and say, well, he might not be fluid enough to play corner. And he's a really smart kid, but might not be physical enough to play safety. When you get so many examples, you start to nitpick too much, which is dangerous at the high school level. I think you give kids the benefit of the doubt and you focus on their strengths and allow them to be coachable and bounce back. But if you do see a downtick and then a reversal, you absolutely give the benefit of the doubt at that point. And we did see that from McKinley. His last 6 months were as good as anybody's in the country in terms of on-field performance. And that's why it got so crazy for him in the end.
All right, so 2 rules: grind the tape. Number 2 rule: don't over scout it. That's what we learned tonight from John Garcia. All right, on to number 7 on your list, the Florida Gators. Now, it has to start, this conversation does, with the couple of misses that they had today, most notably Avante Williams, the DeLand, Florida prospect. So linked to Georgia or Florida, majority of the crystal balls from some of the other prospects or from some of the other networks going to Florida. He winds up with Miami today. What happened there with that case? I know Zach Goodall over there at All Gators was all over it today, but how did they miss on a seemingly can't miss product in Williams?
Yeah, Avante Williams is a very nonlinear kid. He's a very against the grain kind of kid. And man, if there was one kid who was more aware of the perception around his recruitment, point him out. This kid knew everybody was coming with Gators questions, and he got annoyed very consistently throughout the last year or two. And that should have been a red flag for most of us. Even here in the last month or so, once Lorenzo Lingard transferred from Miami to Florida, it's his cousin. People were like, this thing is
It's
completely done.
done. Put a
He's going to
bow
go
on it.
play with Cuzzo. And that day, he laughed it off when I brought it up, and I did not receive the red flag. It was sitting there right in front of my face. I thought he was just playing the game a little bit, but he's a father at this point. He's a mature kid. He don't got time to play these kind of games. So I should have listened to what he was saying at that point. He was all Georgia in December into January. Georgia's numbers got really tight. They really didn't attack the DB board here at the end of the cycle. He got the message and was going to stay in state at the end of the day. And Miami, where he was once committed, remember, never committed to Florida throughout this process, at least publicly, cycled back and pushed very, very hard under Manny Diaz, which is the coach that he liked originally. And that's where he ended up at the end of the day. Much more of a Miami flavor kind of kid than Gainesville type of kid, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. He's cut from the U cloth. And I think Zach Goodall's tweet today over there from All Gators kind of said it best. Avante was asked about that link between him and his cousin there at the University of Florida. And he basically said, look, I'm going to be very, very honest and very clear about this. I'm my own man. I'm going to make my own decisions. And very rarely do you hear 17, 18-year-old kids and young men speak like that. So, like you said, cut from a very different cloth. I think that Georgia necessarily wasn't done recruiting the defensive back position, but I think they were done recruiting, potentially in the box safeties and deep center field safeties more than that. I think they wanted a guy like Branch that could play lockdown corner and has the length and abilities to do that at the next level.
No corner upside with Williams. I agree.
Yeah, no. Williams at the most plays like a Devad Wilson or a Mark Webb star role at the University of Georgia. I think a great player comp for Avante, and I think you'll love this, John, is LaMarcus Joyner. right? An undersized safety slash corner slash slot corner, wherever you want to play him, put him in the box, do whatever you want. I think you said it best, non-linear is the type of football player that this guy is. Can't really fit him into one specific or generic box. All right,
Right.
so what kind of happened? Florida has 6 transfers in this class. What's going on? I asked Zach a little bit about this last night. He said it was more of a fit, just a happenstance there at the University of Florida. But what's going on with all these transfers, and are they transfer you from now on? I almost wanted to say this to Zach, but I didn't want to ruffle any feathers last night. Dan Mullen, not necessarily known for being one of the nation's top recruiters at the high school level. Maybe his steez and his stick might roll a little better with college kids looking for starting opportunities. What say you, John?
Yeah, it makes sense, right? They've won 10 games each of his first 2 seasons there at UF, and we all know when UF is rolling, it's tough to stop. So
Yeah.
some of these kids thinking they're on their last leg, yeah, I mean it's an attractive option. If this is my last chance, then it kind of makes sense for me to go here. And look, with Justin Shorter, who was officially announced today, the big receiver, former elite recruit of Penn State. Florida lost about 100 wide receivers, it seemed like. So whether he's a big receiver, tight end, hybrid, Kyle Pitts will go into his last year of eligibility, and all those receivers are departed. So that one just makes a ton of sense. I think for some of these other positions they got, they tried to approach recruiting that way. At least if you believe Dan Mullen, the reason that UF struck out on the running back position altogether at the prep level was because they picked up Lorenzo Lingard. Now I don't really believe that. I think
is
they
he
would
even going to be eligible first, to start next
exactly.
year?
Exactly. That's
So,
still all to be determined.
man,
You can't say no to Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't think
I
Florida
understand
would
that.
have. EJ Smith, the legacy, of course, Emmett's son. A lot of chatter about whether or not he was a take or not. Again, hard to imagine Florida saying no to either of those guys. But they didn't really get the chance to because they really weren't in the game as late as they considered. So again, Dan is using that portal not only to fill out his roster, but to spin the recruiting drama there a little bit as well. But Florida missed on some big time prospects today. They did pick up Princely. How do you say his last name, Brooks?
Uman Milan, I think
Uman Milan.
man,
Yeah.
I can't even. That's not even on my show notes tonight, and I just drilled that one again. Somebody give me a broadcasting job. I mean, dear Lord.
Yeah,
No,
that was
what I
a
was
big get. That was a big get.
Yeah, a very big get, flipping a defensive end. Well, not really flipping him, but basically flipping him from Baylor. He seemed Baylor leaning the whole entire process. Florida gets in there late and pulls him from over there. I can't quite remember. Oh, I was going to say this. Zach Goodall, I think, said it best. And over there, I'm going to keep plugging the guys down there at All Gators because they're doing a really good job. He said it best today on All Gators on Twitter. 6 hats at National Signing Day, 6 Florida hats were on a table across the country this week or this signing day, and only one of those players ended up picking up that Florida Gator hat and putting it on. Now, I know a lot
Remember,
of these
they
kids
went over in the early period.
Ofer in the
Over
early
like
period.
7 or 8. Yeah.
One for 6 here today. So a total whiffer in every sense of the word for Dan Mullen in terms of high school recruits having to turn again to that transfer portal. And I know my followers will eat that up, and all the most of the people listening to tonight's broadcast will enjoy that a lot. Big Florida whiffing down there. The gap is not closing. The gap is indeed widening. The last SEC team on your list, of course, 6 of the 10. We already talked about it today. Auburn's 2020 class sneaks in right here at number 8. You talked about the junior college prospects and guys in this class, and I know that affects drastically into your deep 2. And I'm hoping, I haven't quite looked at it. I'm hoping most of those guys are on the defensive end because they lose a ton on that defensive side of the football this year for Auburn. Tell us about what the Tigers did out there on the plains today during the second window of National Signing Day, John.
Yeah, they did add a prospect today, another junior college defensive lineman, so you're on the right track. But I actually looked to the guy they added prior on the JUCO defensive line front, DeAndre Butler, kid out of Noonan, Georgia, originally. Monster prospect inside and out. Think of an Emmett Gooden at Arkansas. Think of that type of lineman, a guy who could do a little bit of everything. And Auburn plays with a pretty multiple front, so that's really important as they look to replace the Derek Browns, Marlon Davidsons, of the world. So that'll be really important for them. And then I like the guy they got last week at tight end, Brandon Frazier. I know I keep talking about it, but this kid is 6'6", runs like a deer at tight end, following Chad Morris from Arkansas over to Auburn. And they're promising that they're going to open it up to that position. So not only do I think Auburn chucks it a little bit more next year with Bo Nix heading into year 2, but I think they use the tight end for the first time, maybe since the Cam Newton days in the process. So I do like what Auburn did in the last week to 10 days of the cycle. Not as big of a splash on signing day. Obviously, Broderick Jones canceling that visit last week was a huge deal and was going to keep them outside of the top 5. So they still have questions there on the offensive line, but they hit junior college ranks on the O-line as well. So the trenches are JUCO U right now at Auburn.
All right. I mean, so Auburn doing a good job there. Again, Gus Malzahn, Auburn pretty much traditionally in the top 10 there in recruiting rankings. Gus Malzahn holding firm there in the top 10 as well. So, a couple more talking points, man. I would be remiss if I left this broadcast tonight without talking about Jahmyr Gibbs and the job that Jeff Collins has done there at Georgia Tech. And again, I know a lot of my followers and a lot of my listeners are from the Georgia base, but I'm here to tell you, Jeff Collins, in his second year as a head coach, first real full class here at Georgia Tech, has put together their first top 25 recruiting class in over 2 decades, John. What are they doing down there in Atlanta, that 404 culture? I know a lot of people like to make fun of him. He's kind of cut from that same goofy uncle cloth that Dan Mullen is down there in Florida. What is Jeff Collins doing at Georgia Tech, and how does he hold on to a top 100 talent like Jahmyr Gibbs, who is finally getting recognized late?
Yeah, my favorite running back in this class. I think he's the most balanced and most talented at the end of the day. It's a great debate that will rage on. But this was huge. This is the biggest get, certainly in the Collins tenure, not because just of what Gibbs can do on the field, but because of who you had to be. I mentioned Florida was a monster part of this recruitment. There was a big chunk of time where we thought he was a done deal to the Gators. And LSU, right before the Natty and right after,
on the table today.
Yeah, we thought they were coming really hard after Gibbs. I think the staff turnover really burned LSU there as they look to add him at the end of the day. But either way, Georgia Tech will take it. That was a monster get. Tashard Choice, the running backs coach, former GT and NFL running back, of course, I think really connected with Gibbs. He was their guy from the beginning. Once that staff took over in Atlanta, that was the guy that they jumped in on. Again, early identification. And if you're in the city of Atlanta, you have no excuse not to be early identifiers in the state of Georgia. And obviously Gibbs, I think he had like 1,800 yards as a junior, had some buzz, but not a ton. But they were in at that point instead of when everyone else jumped on this year when he went for about 2,500 yards. So that was a monster get. Tashard Choice was there at midnight, I think, when the contact period opened. 12 o'clock, boom, 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 knocking on the door. Let's get this home visit going. So the effort was there from Georgia Tech. And that's another one, like with Rakestraw, you really like to see that reaction from the coaching staff. I don't know if you saw the video on social media. The whole staff went nuts when they picked up Jahmyr Gibbs. So that was really cool to see. And look, kids know Georgia Tech is wide open. They're changing everything. Opportunity to play is as available there as any Power 5 school in the country. So with that base in Atlanta, there's really no reason they shouldn't be a perennial top 5 recruiting team.
I'll extend it a little further, John. I think they, especially in the trenches, offensive line wise in particular, I think you've got in the next 2 years, if you're a top, high school offensive line project or prospect here in the state of Georgia, you've got an immediate opportunity to start and play early there at Georgia Tech due to that offensive change. They have cycled out a ton of offensive line prospects, as you would imagine that they're going to. They go from that triple option, almost 4-point stance, running the football, to now a full conventional spread. They need a lot bigger offensive linemen and a lot more pass protective offensive linemen on that roster. Now, John, I've teased here on Twitter. I've got to get your latest update on Jordan Burch. What the heck is going on?
I'm leaving.
You're leaving. He says bailing. I got to get what's going on with Jordan Burch. Look, we reported on Twitter today that, as of about 6 o'clock today, the University of South Carolina had not received Jordan Burch's letter of intent, and I'm still under the impression that they have not. Now, Alex Huntley, his teammate there at Hammond High School, signed paperwork during the same exact signing ceremony that took place today at Hammond High School. South Carolina has his paperwork, has announced that they have gotten his paperwork, have put the fancy committed / official tweet out. Am I just led to believe, John, that the fax machine broke at Hammond High School today, or what the heck is going on with one of the nation's top defensive end prospects and one of the last remaining 5-star commit? What's going on with Jordan Burch? What is the latest?
Yeah, well, he could walk over the paper if he had to, or take a picture with one of these things.
Yeah.
They could take that. But look, this is the story of this cycle, not named Zach Evans. This is bizarre. There have been 2 signing days, 2 South Carolina caps, 2 theoretical signatures, and now 2 Will Muschamp press conferences where we don't know anything new about Jordan Burch. Look, I got the Gamecocks football account on notification. I've never said that in my life. Like you said, they've announced everybody else, including his teammate, who was 5 feet away from him when he signed. It's just bizarre. And it's not just that he didn't sign. It's that he announces, I want to go play with my friends. I was watching the IG live. I want to go play with my friends. He signs some kind of piece of paper, puts on the hat, and then won't talk to anybody about it, including all South Carolina type media in attendance. And then even after that, they say, okay, we don't want an interview. Can you just confirm that you signed a letter of intent? Mom steps in,
Yeah.
no interviews, no confirmation, no denial. And the mom is really running this thing. At Under Armour after the game, I talked to Burch. I said, hey, good game, great week. You're going to finish as an elite guy for us, first team SI All-American, all that. Hey, let's talk about the month of January. He says, oh, sir, I apologize. My mom's not allowing me to do interviews. So it's her show right now. Clearly, she shut down his interviews in January, and now we're in the month of February, and she's still doing the same thing. Why? I have no idea. She went to LSU with him, and obviously she was on board with the South Carolina stuff today. I don't get it. This doesn't seem like the Burch that we know. This doesn't seem within his personality to do this on purpose. So something else could be at play. I'm not sure. Maybe he's just gonna enroll in May and just go across the street or however close it is and start his career at USC. I'm not sure, but for me, he's a shy kid. He's a reserved kid.
Yeah.
Sign the paper and be done. If you don't, this stuff is not going to go away. It's only
No,
going to
it's just
increase,
going to linger.
especially after today. This is going to be the top 2020 storyline between him and Zach Evans the rest of the spring.
Now, John, you're not the first person in one of these national recruiting services to, come out with the opinion and the facts that mom's running this show. Look, I spoke to a gentleman that's in your very specific job title and very specific job, description for a competing website. And I'll withhold his name because I haven't asked him if I can report on this. But, he said, Mom gave him 3 questions. Mom said, you've got 3 questions. After question 3, you're done. Interview's over. And that's that. And then he asked question 1. Jordan looked at Mom as if, can I answer this question? Mom nodded yes or no. Interview continued from there. Like, that's the situation that we're dealing with here in Jordan Burch. And now I go to this, John, and this isn't me reporting on anything. This is just me throwing out a theory because that's what this is. This is a little bit of a show mixed with a little bit of, dynamic and journalistic intel. Now, what about this, John? What if Mom wants him to go to South Carolina and Jordan's not so sold about playing for a 6-7, 7-6 football team there at South Carolina? What if he wants to play at LSU, who I don't know if they still have room, but assuming that they do. What if that's the case? They do. Okay. So what if that's the case? What if we don't have a letter of intent because Jordan still has to put his name on that signing sheet? We've seen Mom and Dad and recruit or prospect have problems and have conflicts on National Signing Day before. Is this possibly a case? Am I onto something here when I say that maybe there's a little bit of discord there in that household between mom and son about where son will inevitably play his college football?
There's a disconnect somewhere. And like you said, the facts are with her in January and now into February. She is running this show. So the results of that show are incomplete. Those are the facts, right? So there is some kind of disconnect there. I wouldn't be surprised either way at this point. Maybe maybe it's a misunderstanding. Maybe they want to be different. Maybe they want the headlines. Maybe it's a smoke screen, or maybe she just wants to be the first mom to interrupt two signing ceremonies. I'm not sure, but clearly she's involved to a very strong degree. And the facts say, as long as he is unsigned, this will continue to be a discussion. And unfortunately for both of them, speculation's only going to go in one direction the longer this thing drags out.
I keep getting comments about Kentucky. We'll talk about Kentucky when I get John out of here. I've already extended too much of his time here, already taken up too much of a very busy man's schedule. Let's get on to some of these quick talking points before I send you out for the night, John. And again, I greatly appreciate you here. Who's a team that won National Signing Day today, not named Georgia? Who's a coaching staff that really pulled a rabbit out of the hat today? And for that matter, early National Signing Day as well. Who in 2020 really stole the show, not named the Georgia Bulldogs?
Yeah, so obviously we're talking about teams, outside of the top 10. I like what Tennessee did. I thought they really pushed the envelope offensively. They want to push the ball down the field. They want to evolve into that kind of offense. And you bring in two legitimate basketball player pass catchers in DeMarcus Beckwith and Malachi Wideman, a first-team SI All-American guy. And you beat some big-time programs to do it. Wideman was down to Florida State, Oregon, Ole Miss, and Tennessee, while Beckwith was one of those guys that we thought Florida had a really good chance with until the last week or so. So I thought Tennessee did a really nice job. They had secured good prospects in the early period. Big fan of Harrison Bailey, the quarterback. He may start next year. He may be the first freshman to win a job.
Can I
He might
can
be
I
that
pump
good.
can I pump brakes on that just for a second, John? Now, look,
Sure.
I'm as a firm believer of Harrison Bailey as the next guy, and he looks pretty thick and pretty big in pads. I just don't know. He's going to have to put on 10, 15 pounds, maybe even 20 before he walks out in August and is a starting quarterback. That being said, the cupboard's pretty barren there at Tennessee. I know Gorentano returns. I know Brian Maurer returns at that quarterback position. Harrison Bailey, much more talented than the both of them. But what I'm going to have to tell you is, and you've seen him as well, John, especially in the camp circuit, he's got to put on some weight. And maybe the Knoxville food and the Knoxville staff can get up there and put some, meat on those bones, but he's pretty thin in the hips. But I'm in a total agreement with you. Love what Tennessee did. Anytime you're able to go out and flip commits on National Signing Day, it's indications that your program is enviable. Your program is, carrying weight in the national
They're
scenes,
doing well. I like what
and they're
Kentucky
doing
did too.
well. Yeah,
Kentucky too.
and Mark Stoops, man, top 25 in the SEC. Not in the SEC, top 25 overall in this class, and has flat out killed it in state as well. There at Kentucky, can't talk enough about Mark Stoops' job, and to have that team, 10 wins for the first time since 1977, I believe. There just 2 years ago. Last year followed it up in, with a bowl performance and a bowl, eligible football team with no quarterback there. You get the transfer from Auburn in there at the quarterback position. I'm blanking on his name, but
Joey
a really
Gatewood.
yeah, Joey Gatewood, a really talented quarterback there. So the quarterback position should be solved, assuming he is eligible. So, some good things all trending up there at Kentucky. Again, a 7 or 8 win football team last year with no quarterback, Lynn Bowden playing the quarterback position. So I asked you, who's a winner? Who's a team that lost National Signing Day? And don't tell me South Carolina or Southern California, because we know all about that. Who's a team that lost National Signing Day, John, other than USC?
Yeah, and USC lost Michael Drennan, the running back, to Kentucky. When's the last time that's happened?
I don't know
Outside
if
of
it ever.
basketball?
I don't know if it ever has, John.
Yeah.
Especially not in
So,
football.
yeah, Southern Cal speaks for itself at this point. I actually think Texas had an up and down day. They finished in the top 10, but they really could have pushed for a top 5 spot if everything broke their way. They did get Alfred Collins, but that was the biggest shoe-in from their group. So I thought they were kind of up and down. Oklahoma didn't really bounce back at the end of the day. They lost out on the top class in the Big 12 to Texas, which was a surprise for me. But really, it's all the Pac-12 outside of Oregon. They're in the top 10. Everyone else is down. It's not just USC. Washington is not recruiting at its clip. Stanford isn't the same recruiting machine that it once was. So some disappointing stuff out west. And then in the Big Ten, I thought there was a little bit of lull in general. That conference seemed to be kind of done with National Signing Day. But again, a loser. Florida, Florida in the last two signing days, you're talking about they signed one of about 15 kids that they had a hat on the table for. Yes, Princely U is a good player, but there's no one kid who makes up for 14 misses. And these are true misses. And I think Florida on signing day just hasn't figured it out yet under Dan Mullen.
Yeah, and I was told he was pretty much laughed out of the Dalton High School building as well. It was rather actually some high school kids actually made some jokes in his passing on the way out. So kind of a wasted trip as he took the trip all the way to Dalton. Look, an in-home visit from the head coach of an SEC program, just 48 hours, 72 hours prior to National Signing Day. And Georgia Tech ends up landing him again. We'll circle back to it. I don't think that can say enough about what Jeff Collins is doing there at Georgia Tech. I think they're one of our big winners from today as well. And secondarily, I think that kind of says what Dan Mullen can and can't do in terms of the recruiting world. So we'll see what that plays forward, plays on moving forward. John, man, I can't thank you enough for coming on tonight. Tell the folks how they can find out all your great work over there at SI All-American, my man.
Yeah, SIAllamerican.com, at SI All-American on all platforms. We even got Facebook now, so trying to keep up with the young guys out there. Yeah, we've got a ton of coverage, a ton of recap type stuff. We have our live blog that was real time all day long. We even got into the group of five. Cincinnati, Luke Fickell can recruit, y'all. Cincinnati out recruits about a dozen Power 5 schools. Cincinnati had a great signing day. So yeah, check out all the work from the top in the SEC all the way on down. We got you covered.
Thank you very much, my brother. We'll see you next time. All right.
All right, Brooks. Have a good show.
You too, buddy. All right, that was John Garcia. And for that, we're going to wrap up tonight's podcast portion of tonight's broadcast. So we're going to open up the floor to any questions that any of my viewers have, about today's National Signing Day, whether I thought, there was a winner or a loser, whether you've got a question about a Georgia commit or a Georgia signee from today's class, or whether or not you just want to talk some ball, get into the comment section and hit us with those questions. But before we get into that, man, and while we're waiting on those to load up just a little bit, if they ever even come in, but we got a handful of viewers, so send those questions in. Before we get into that, man, Auburn kind of have a rough day today. I know John had them finishing up in the top 10 in the SI All-Americans rankings for the 2020 class. You got Tank Bigsby, all great, all fine and dandy, but you lose your two-year consecutive leading rusher there to the transfer portal. Rumors are, speculations are, from what I've heard on social media, it was kind of an expected thing, but nonetheless, you lose a returner there and a starter at the tailback position. And then how about Aaron McLaughlin, the 2021 former quarterback commit from Auburn, snuck in a decommitment today on social media. So had a chance to see him at Hustle Inc.'s tryout just a couple of weeks ago. Man, you're talking about a guy that can absolutely sling the football and rip the pigskin. How about all those little cliches? We'll probably mix some more in before the end of the night. But anyways, talking about a big-bodied guy who can absolutely rip the football. Now, essentially a free agent in that 2021 class. We know he won't be coming to Georgia, assuming that they hold up with that Brock Vandagriff commitment. But where will he ultimately land, and will he end up turning his eyes back to Auburn? And if Chad Morris can develop a relationship. I don't know if that had anything to do with his decommitment today, just something to pay attention to moving forward. So that is our news on Aaron McLaughlin. If you missed our portion of the show tonight with John Garcia about Jordan Burch, look, LOI still not turned in. And again, we're waiting on all those questions to come in. We just got one, so we'll load that one up here in a second. But Jordan Burch, the news out of Columbia today, still haven't had that LOI turned in, even though Alex Huntley, his Hammond High School teammate, has reportedly turned in his LOI, and that's been, answered and reported on from the school. So we'll see what happens moving forward with Jordan Burch. But let's get into some of these questions. Sean Gomes over there on YouTube hits us up with, who do I think is the best Georgia signee in this 2020 class? Kind of a double-ended question here, Sean, and I think you can attack this from a multiple, viewpoints here. First of all, I'll say this: who has the highest ceiling in the 2020 class? I don't think you have to look any further than Broderick Jones, a 6'5", 295 pound tackle. I got a chance to take a look at him today at the Lithonia signing there in Lithonia High School, just east of DeKalb here in Atlanta. And I'm going to tell you what, man, they don't make better looking athletes at the tackle position than Broderick. He's still raw as an offensive tackle. He hadn't played the position very long. It's going to take a couple thousand more reps before he is a first-round caliber talent. But that is where this kid is heading. Do not get it twisted. That's what he will ultimately be when he leaves the University of Georgia. I don't think he's going to pack on the poundage that Isaiah Wilson did during his time at the University of Georgia with, Scott Sinclair in that weightlifting program. But I don't think there's a strength and conditioning program that is better in the SEC than what Georgia's got going on. And Broderick is a young man who's going to need it. He still needs, I think his frame, especially, I think can hold upwards of 315, 320 pounds, and he's going to be a dynamic athlete at that weight as well. Next question coming in here from Bell Tramus. Bell, I'm sorry, man. I butcher your name every single time you get in here and ask questions. Can you, Jay, take Birch if you wanted to come? No. Georgia's 2020 class is wrapped. The bow is put up on that. They're done. They have no more room, barring somebody jumping in the transfer portal tonight and getting out immediately and filling up, a scholarship role. I don't think they can fit any more people into that class. Look, the communication lines between Birch and Georgia were strong there for a while. Prior to early National Signing Day, he did take a visit to Athens. He was there and did get a chance to talk to the staff. But again, Mom is running that recruitment process, as John and I alluded to earlier in tonight's broadcast. If you missed out on that, I know FQ Clemson's in here on the Periscope feed or on the Twitter feed asking about Birch. If you missed the update on Birch, check out the podcast, SEC Nightly. It will be up as soon as we turn off the live stream here. But back to Birch just for a minute. LOI still hasn't been turned in. We don't know what's happening. Everyone kind of just assumes that it's, kind of a battleground right now. I think the safe assumption right now, at least for me, this is not a sourced opinion. This is Brooks Austin's opinion. Third person didn't feel comfortable doing that. This is my opinion. Jordan Birch, there is a disgruntled or, a disagreement in that household right now about where he wants to play. There is a break in the chain of communication somewhere. Somebody wants him at South Carolina. Somebody wants to play elsewhere. And I think that elsewhere is LSU. I think if you had to name a name, that's the one. He enjoyed that official visit out there. And for a long time, he was on flip watch to the Tigers. That is my opinion. I think if he ends up anywhere, LSU still has room for him. Georgia does not. If the LOI never arrives in Columbia, I think he's there in Baton Rouge in 2020. Okay, on to our next question. How do I feel about Keeley, and do you think he will start? I don't think the highest rated player in Georgia's class year in and year out has ever not played as a true freshman under Kirby Smart. Take back, I could be very, very wrong about this, but go back and look. Starting in 2017 with his first full class, if you're a five-star, if you're the highest rated recruit in that class, you're going to play early. Now, here's the question, right? Eric Stokes Jr., DJ Daniel, Tyson Campbell, all three cornerbacks that are returning in 2020 for the University of Georgia. All three players played relatively well in 2019. Stokes and Daniel in particular, that's who started the Sugar Bowl for the University of Georgia, and that's pretty much who started the last 10 games, barring any health concerns for the University of Georgia as well. So those guys are returning, but here's the deal about Keely Ringo. 6'2", 205 pounds, obviously an incredible athlete, a 4.3 runner in the 40. I don't think there's any questions about whether or not he's going to play a facet of positions in the defensive backfield for the University of Georgia. Do they mix him into a role like Tyreek Stevenson last year? I don't know. But here's one thing I do know. The University of Georgia is not about signing five stars the caliber of Keely Ringo and not allowing them to get on the field early. Keely, like Broderick Jones, to me, is a future first-round draft pick. I've compared him multiple times to Patrick Peterson on our website. Again, the length, 6'2", the weight and frame at 205 pounds, likely going to be 215-ish range by the time he leaves the University of Georgia, and might go sub 4.3 by the time he's all fully developed at the NFL Combine in a couple of years. Keely Ringo, dynamite prospect. It doesn't take long to figure that out. So I think he will. I don't know if he'll start, Sean Gomes, but I do think he's going to play early and often at the University of Georgia. I didn't get to read this one Here we go. Like Kirby said, we want to play. Yeah, that's just a general comment, excuse me, from John J. Convict right here. We want guys that want to play here. We're done chasing guys around who don't believe in our values. I think he's mentioning Jordan Birch here. But yeah, it's something that Lad McConkey actually talked to us about over there at the Bulldog Maven. Check out bulldogmaven.com. Slick plug there. Yeah, it's something Lad McConkey talked about over there with us in an interview we had. Blaine Gilbert sat down and talked to him, right after his offer from the University of Georgia, before he was even a committed player, right after Kirby spent some time in an in-home visit out there at North Murray, or in the North Murray area, chasing after McConkey. And he told him, look, he's done wondering if guys are going to skip class. He's done wondering where guys are, if they're going to stay out of trouble. He's concerned primarily moving forward about character first, talent second, in a offering wise in 2022 as well. Take Amarius Mims, take DJ Daniel, and Brock Vandergrift, the current commits, off the board. Look, Georgia is going to continue chasing 5 stars and top talent. But what I'm telling you is, if you look at their offer sheet, it's a lot of in-state guys. It's a lot of 3 stars, 4 stars, not necessarily the nation's highly touted football players, but it's all football players that would pass a character test. And when you talk to their high school football coaches, they're first kind of football players. And I think that's probably taking precedence moving forward. One thing I do know and can report about the 2021 classes and 2022 classes out of the University of Georgia, quarterbacks going to be in them. We know that, right? Brock Vandergrift going to take a look at Gunnar Stockton in 2022. More than a look, they're going to heavily pursue him. But another thing I know, they're going to be bringing in a lot of offensive linemen, okay? They brought in a lot in this class. They're going to be bringing in even more in the next class. It's a position that they're going to have to fill, and fill quickly. But the other thing I know, character is no longer going to be an issue and no longer going to be a point of concern for Kirby Smart. He's going to he's going to select players based off their character and talent as well. So any more questions on tonight's broadcast, feel free to get them in. We had a couple of them backed up there in the comment section. And if we don't have any more, that's okay. I've been talking for an hour, and Lord knows I could shut up. I could use, some time to stop talking. But one guy I do want to talk about, actually, we're not going to hit on Gervon Dexter because I'm not here to smash any young high school athletes. But I will tell you this. Not exactly bought on Gervon Dexter. I know he's huge. I know he's massive. I know it's easy to do the Chris Jones thing. But I know one thing is, and Javon Kinlaw. I heard that comparison. Javon Kinlaw. Like, just because you're 6'7", 315 pounds, that you're going to go out there and show bursts and athleticism and explosiveness. I don't know. Javon Kinlaw might be able to, Gervon Dexter might turn into that in the future, but I don't think it's safe to be out here throwing those comparisons around, especially when we saw what Javon could do, even at the SEC, the Senior Bowl. Talk about Muschamp, son. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know a ton about Jackson Muschamp because he wasn't really on the radar, okay? I'm going to be honest with you. I'm 100% forthcoming about this. Rusty Manziel's really good at his job. No one in our industry had that, at least no one on my end. I hadn't heard anything about Muschamp's son leading up, potential to come to Georgia, even though he was on some visits. Never in a million years did I think that this was going to be the name that we had to pay attention to the night before National Signing Day, especially considering that quarterback room is more than filled up. You got a preferred walk-on from Nevada that transferred in. You got Jamie Newman, obviously, Carson Beck, Dwayne Mathis, Stetson Bennett. You're going to have Brock Vandergrift in 2021. Okay, that room is massively filled. The last thing I thought that was going to happen was Jackson Muschamp coming in and playing on this roster, or getting in on this 2020 class, even via the walk-on variety. Who's the 2022 quarterback we mentioned? Gunnar Stockton was on campus during, I believe it was the Ole Miss basketball game. Our Blaine Gilbert reported that he was sitting next to Buster Faulkner, the newest. How about those two names, by the way? I'm sitting here at a poker game. I've got 2 pocket aces of Gunnar Stockton and Buster Faulkner. Can you give me 2 better football names? I guarantee you cannot. Anyways, he was at the University of Georgia at a basketball game. Ole Miss already taking, some unofficial visits to the University of Georgia, a Rabun County product. And this is a guy who Kirby Smart, took the helicopter out there to Rabun County to see as a true freshman. September 4th, a date that Georgia fans will want to put on their calendar. as Gunnar Stockton and Brock Vandergrift will face off Raven County versus Prince Avenue. Excuse me. Uh-oh. Y'all just saw the corner of my green screen. Yes, this is a green screen behind me. Illusion, ruined. Sorry about that. Let's move on to our next question. Sean, back in the comments. Love you here, Sean. An avid listener and an avid viewer is Mr. Gomes. But how do I feel about Milton? Let me tell you what. I can't speak highly enough about Kendall as an individual, as a football player. Can't speak highly enough about his parents. Had a couple of opportunities to talk to Chris over the last 72 hours or so. We wrote a piece on Kendall. When all that mess and all that crap about Zach Evans and all that, whether or not Georgia's going to take two backs, they end up taking two backs. Dejon Edwards getting into the class felt like us over there at the Bulldog. Maybe we felt like Kendall was losing a bit of a shine on his name and the attention brought to him in joining that 2020 class. And here's what I'm here to tell you about, man. You're not going to find, a guy that's going to a bigger back, a more elusive and more dynamic back than Kendall Milton. Look, Chris told me, his dad told me he showed up January 8th and in Athens at 217 pounds. By January 31st, when I was talking to Chris, he had already gained 11 pounds up to 227 pounds in a matter of about 2 weeks there at the University of Georgia. So he's a big back, only getting bigger. And I genuinely think he is going to push Zamir White for some carries here in 2020. It might not be week 1 through 5, but weeks 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and on through the playoffs and on through the SEC championship game and whatnot, assuming Georgia gets there, I think you're really, really going to see some talented flashes from Kendall Milton in a star, not necessarily a star role, but a secondary feature role. What's up, Kobe Ellis? Appreciate you jumping in on tonight's broadcast. Let's see here. Get to Jesse Shelton's question. Do you think Zamir, as of today, is the running back Georgia will be counting on next year? Yes, absolutely. Heading into spring practice, despite Kendall Milton already being on campus and already getting weight room reps up and having an opportunity to practice in spring this year, Zeus is going to get the primary role, assuming nothing happens this offseason, no injuries, God forbid, or anything like that. I don't see James Cook pushing him for primary roles, and I definitely don't, I shouldn't say definitely. I should have flipped those. I don't see Kenny McIntosh pushing for primary roles and primary carries, and I definitely don't see James Cook, pushing him for the primary position right there at the running back position in 2020. I think Zamir is going to get the main bulk load of carries. And here's something I think you could kind of see. Zamir has already been in college 2 years. He could be draft eligible after, a flash of a redshirt sophomore year. Potentially does Georgia, knowing that they have an already filled up running backs room, Kenny McIntosh with an extra year of eligibility after 2020. Same deal with James Cook, I believe. Obviously, you're going to have Kendall Milton, Dejon Edwards, and whatever follows in the 2021 cycle. Does Kirby Smart maybe feed Zamir White as many touches as possible and potentially boost his draft grade to possibly get him out in the 2021 draft? Great year at the college level. In fact, 4 great years is almost a detriment. Even 3 great years is almost a detriment. Look what's happening to Jonathan Taylor right now in his draft evaluation. This is a guy who's gotten over 900. I don't know how many carries. We're going to call it 900. He's got a crap load of carries there at Wisconsin over 3 years. And NFL draft analysts and scouts are really downgrading his draft stock because of that. Less touches, less hits, less wear and tear on the product coming into the next level is something that NFL scouts evaluate and something they care about, something that's boosting DeAndre Swift's draft evaluation too. So if, that offense of system can get Zamir White a bunch of touches, get his, draft profile and draft buzz surrounding the former number 1 overall recruit in all of the 2018 class, if that can happen, perhaps they can get him out, into that 2021 class in the draft and free up some extra space. What up? I see the 4-letter network has Clemson with the number 1 overall class. How and why with the overall talent in this class? You know what? I'm gonna sum it up real quick right here, Big Dog 404. ESPN, or as I call them, the mothership, right? Shout out to Dan Patrick. If y'all don't get that reference, y'all need to listen to DP a little bit more often. World A little shout out to him. Anyways, the four-letter word, the four-letter network, the mothership, the whole Clemson thing, I don't know. Everybody has their own different systems. We had John Garcia on tonight's show to explain what's going on with SI All-Americans list. I only know how that one works. And what I can tell you is Clemson's number 2 because of their 2 deep and their 2-year rankings here at SI All-American. Georgia's number 1. Alabama's finished 3. I don't understand why ESPN's got Clemson number 1. Perhaps it's because Dabo Swinney has sent a rather defaming voicemail talking about nobody ever likes us. This is just more, ability for me to throw fuel on the fire and tell everybody that nobody cares about us. But now maybe ESPN's spinning that a little bit backwards to maybe shut Dabo up a little bit. I don't know, Big Dog 404. Great question, though, and I appreciate you for asking it. What 3 or low 4-star do you think will play better than expected? I think the easy answer here, Bill, has to be Ladd McConkey, right? Running more of an air raid system here at the University of Georgia, or that's expected, at least more changes than not, right? They're going to throw the ball a little bit more than just 43% of their offensive snaps next year in 2021 or in 2020. If they don't, I don't really know why Kirby Smart went out and hired Todd Monken and Buster Faulkner. I know he said today he wasn't really ready to answer any questions about how much more the offense is going to be opening up in his press conference, but I'm here to tell you that it's probably going to open up some. So what that means is you're going to have a space creator like McConkey in the slot to be able to get in and out of breaks and, get in and find open zones, man. A lot of air raid offenses, they require at least 1 or 2 wide receivers to have, read routes. What is the famous read route? Stick. You ever ran the stick route in Madden or NCAA? What is that? It's an option route. It's where the wide receiver has the option to either sit down on a route, break it in, break it out, do whatever. There's options off of the route, right? That's why it's called an option route. The wide receiver has a chance to do what he wants based off of the coverage. Well, what that requires is a rather smart individual to play those positions. A guy like Dominique Blaylock, who's a seasoned wide receiver, a guy like Jermaine Burton, a guy like Ladd McConkey that's going to be in there, be able to get in there early, find space, and, occupy it. So, answering questions here. Again, we've been taking questions for the last probably 20 minutes here on SEC Nightly. We do this Monday through Friday, starting at 9 o'clock, barring any changes. If I got a hoops game, typically we start at 9:30, push it back a little bit. If I have a buddy getting engaged on a weeknight, which is weird, fellas. Look, successful professional people, I hope he's watching. John Knight, I'm going to call you out. Hope my buddy's watching. Us successful professional people, we have prior engagements. Some of them go Monday through Friday. So don't do anything on Monday night. Anyways, back to, SEC Nightly, Monday through Friday. Let me throw the banner up there right quick because most of you guys aren't watching us on the Twitter machine. Follow us on Twitter if you guys don't mind. Right there. So let's get into our next question. Does Carson Beck have the arm strength that I have read about, or is that all hype? Look, Jesse Shelton, I'm not going to front. I'm not going to tell you that Carson Beck has a cowitzer or a howitzer, I think is the word, or the cliche for a big arm on a quarterback. He doesn't have an Aaron McLaughlin arm. He, like we talked about earlier in the show, he dang sure don't have Brock Vandagriff arm talent. But I'm going to tell you what he does have. He has, an immense ability to compete. He always wants to win. It doesn't matter who you are. He's going to try to beat you out. Okay, I think that's very, very important at the quarterback position. I know it all sounds, cliche and intangible-ish, and a lot of the same stuff you've heard about Jake Fromm over the last 3 years at the University of Georgia, and some stuff that's turned you off to the quarterback that started 43 games in a row for the University of Georgia. But what I am going to tell you, nothing's ever going to rattle Carson Beck. This is a guy who took, a football team there at Mandarin High School that had never, I don't think they had ever won a, state championship there in that classification in the state of Florida. And as a junior, he took them to a state championship after a 9-3 regular season record. So what does that tell you? It tells you they entered the playoffs as a lower seed and they beat teams that they weren't expected to beat. And I think that is an indication of what Carson Beck is as a college prospect. He's going to beat and exceed expectations that are placed upon him. When and how much he gets to play at the University of Georgia, that is still TBD. That is to be determined. But I'm going to tell you right now, Carson Beck said on his Instagram Live story the other day, that's what my life's come to, watching Instagram Live feeds from, college football players. But he said on his Instagram Live feed the other day, he is not interested in redshirting. So what does that tell you? He is very, very interested in chasing Jamie Newman down for that assumed starting position at the quarterback position at the University of Georgia in year one. So there's a little answer about Carson Beck. Does he have the first round arm talent? No, but a lot of quarterbacks don't. They don't all get born with Brock Vandagriff. They don't all get born with even Dwayne Mathis, for that matter. Dwayne Mathis got one of the stronger arms I've ever seen as well. Big Dog 404 back in the questions here. Actually, I think we've got to move up just a little bit. Do you think it is more likely for Demetrius Robertson or one of the freshmen to have a breakout year? Demetrius getting back into a system that he claims that he's a little more comfortable with. Something we talked to him about after the SEC championship game. He said he was going to be vocal about a change, said he was going to be vocal about getting into more of an air raid system and opening things up a little bit in 2020, whereas his exact words. But obviously, this is a guy at Cal who had a dominant freshman year, who had almost 1,000 yards as a true freshman there at Cal. The Savannah project, the Savannah, Georgia prospect, transferred back to his home state, took a year off, waited, got eligible, played at Georgia, and then just hasn't been able to put it together since. So whether or not he's going to have a breakout year, I don't know, but I think it's lending towards him having the opportunity to do so. One thing I also know about Kirby Smart, though he likes to play the young guys, he's going to give the older guy every opportunity to lose that job. Those freshmen are going to have to win it. They're not going to just be handed it, and Demetrius Robinson will get more than the ample opportunity to have that breakout year that everyone's been waiting on since he's got to the University of Georgia. All right, got to tell you guys, we're down to our last couple of questions. We're going to get to my guy, Christopher White here. And I think we already hit this one. What freshman gets the most playing time this coming season? Maybe we haven't hit this one, Christopher, and I hope we haven't because I'm probably going to give a different answer. How about Jalen Carter, Tyler Clark, Michael Barnett leave, obviously, to graduation purposes. There's a lot of snaps in there. Look, I know Azeez Ojulari. I know Trayvon Walker. I know, they've got a handful of other names that I'm forgetting on that defensive line right now because we're on live television and live broadcasting. That's just how it works sometimes. So you just fill until you can find another name. Can't find how about Malik Herron? Another name. Broadcasting 101. Anyways, back to what we were talking about. I think there's ample opportunity for Jalen Carter to play, a guy who just got his 5th star from 24/7 rankings, and a guy who I've laid out on Twitter and showed some clips of him in Under Armour All-American game, just absolutely manhandling and abusing fellow top 100 recruits and top 100 commits. So he can still rag toss, grown men at 6'3", 300 pounds. I think the real comp for me, when I watch him at the high school level, especially, I don't know if it's going to translate into this, but it looks like this to me, just on a little bit of a bigger frame, and that's Aaron Donald. When I watch Jalen Carter, I see burst of Aaron Donald. I see hand fight of Aaron Donald, and I see the leverage. Playing with leverage on the defensive line is so, so vitally important. All right, last question of the night. Let's make it a good one. Oh, man. Kovacevic, I think I pronounced that right, Kovacevic Debrini. Is Dejon Edwards the sleeper of the class? No. Ladd McConkey, sleeper of the class. Dejon Edwards, as much as I love him, don't know how much he's going to get on the field, especially as a freshman, sophomore season. We'll see if Zamir White does indeed leave because, like we stacked it up already. Dejon Edwards is going to have to defy some odds to get on the field at the University of Georgia at that tailback position, especially. It's RBU for a reason. As much as I do love Dejon Edwards' talents, I think he is definitely slept on in the sense of, he dropped about 100 spots for some reason, a couple of hours before National Signing Day. A lot of people are going to tell me that that's 24/7, having their ways about hating Georgia, but I think that's a lot of conspiracy theories from Georgia fans. I think that happens a lot in the SEC fan base because, look, everybody hates you, right? Everybody's a hater. Nobody likes your program and all that good stuff. Everybody's hating on you, and nobody wants you to win. But guess what? I'm here to tell you, SEC Nightly wants you to win, folks. Wherever your team is, go over to SI.com, find your team site. We got pro sites too, man. We got guys that do videos or do jobs like mine, team sites all across the country, across even NBA and even MLB. If you got an MLB team, you got an NBA team, NFL team, NCAA team like mine over there on the Bulldog Maven, check it out. We got you. I appreciate all the comments rolling in right now about a great show. We do this Monday through Friday, starting at 9 o'clock. And every once in a while, if we've got the viewers, if we've got the questions rolling in, we'll extend it a little bit past the podcast audience that we typically do. We'll keep the streamcast rolling, even though I've been sweating up underneath this suit for about 20 minutes, because if you guys can't tell, there's professional lights right here, and they get a little hot after about an hour and 10 minutes. Next video coming out on my video breakdown. I know I've been talking about this on YouTube. It's probably coming tonight. I don't know what I'm going to break down. I still owe the tight ends and the quarterback position at the University of Georgia a video breakdown, so I got to get to those. I'm backed up, to be honest with you. I've got way too much coming in right now. National Signing Day really threw a kink in my chink. If you will, I don't think I said that right. A kink in my chain, if you will, definitely happened there with the National Signing Day. So I've been really, really busy, as you guys can imagine. If you guys follow us over there at the Bulldog Maven, you would have seen all of the content we've pumped out, including an article I put out today during the show. How about that? Multi-talented, multifaceted. We appreciate you guys for tuning in here on SEC Nightly. Again, Monday through Friday. Follow the show on Twitter. Show the show some support wherever you found us. If it's Facebook, share it. If it's Twitter, hit that screen a bunch of times. Fly those hearts all up over the screen. If it's YouTube, hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe, and whatever, social media networks I missed, hit those, show the support there. Podcast audience, you've already stopped listening to us. But those of you that are tuning in right now, if you missed any part of tonight's show, if you missed our update on Jordan Birch, if you missed our update on Zach Evans, just kidding, we didn't give you one, but it's a good tease. If you missed our update with John Garcia Jr. about the top 10 class of the inaugural class over there on SI.com and SI All-American, check out the podcast. It's available wherever, however you get your podcast. Just search SEC Nightly. That is our show for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Appreciate you for flooding us with questions. And as always, most importantly, appreciate you for watching. Hope you had a good time. Hope you had some fun here on SEC Nightly. I have been your humble host, Brooks Austin. This has been SEC Nightly. We will see you guys tomorrow night.